thing about having a really bad neighbor is that it can really ruin your life. It can ruin your sense of peace. It can ruin your ability to sleep, to do a good job at work, because there's no getting away from them. They live right there, right next to you. So in this video, I'm going to be answering the question, when can you get a restraining order against your neighbor, even when there's no violence and no threat of violence? My name is Veronica. I'm an attorney here in California, and I help people put their cases behind them so that they can enjoy their lives and their freedom. Okay, so let's jump right in. Let's talk about when your neighbor is so annoying that you can get a restraining order against them. The type of restraining order that you would get against your neighbor in the state of California is called a civil harassment restraining order. And so in order to get a civil harassment restraining order, you need to be able to show the judge that there was harassment. So then the question is, well, what really counts as harassment? Harassment is defined as unlawful violence, a credible threat of violence, or, and this is where the annoyance comes in, a knowing and willful course of conduct directed at a specific person that seriously alarms, annoys, or harasses the person, and that serves no legitimate purpose. And the course of conduct, per the law, has to be something that would cause a reasonable person to suffer substantial emotional distress. And then you personally, the person asking for the restraining order, has to actually suffer from substantial emotional distress. So the question then is, how do you know if your neighbor has really knowingly and willfully engaged in a course of conduct directed at you that seriously alarms, annoys, or harasses you and serves no legitimate purpose? And obviously, you're going to know if you suffered substantial emotional distress. It's about just showing it to the judge. But how do you know if a reasonable person in your position would suffer from emotional distress? And if that sounds subjective, it's because it is. So it's really important to present your case well in front of the judge and make sure that the judge is able to sort of put themselves in your position. Let's go through some examples. Number one, every evening after 10 p.m., your neighbor bangs on the ceiling with a broom whenever you engage in regular activities like walking or watching TV at a normal volume. You live in an old place, there's thin insulation. You've explained to them, your landlord's explained, the police have explained that it's not illegal to walk and talk at any hour of the day in your apartment, but they continue doing it. So as a result, you have this feeling of anxiety, a feeling that you cannot relax in your own home. And that might be enough to get a civil harassment restraining order. But if they only tap the ceilings when you have loud gatherings, parties late at night, or you play music at high volumes, then that's probably not going to be enough to get a restraining order. All right, second example. Your neighbor calls the police every day that you play the acoustic guitar, even though you're trying to strum kind of lightly, and even though you only play during reasonable daytime volumes. They've even made comments like, "I'll make sure you never play that thing again," indicating that anytime you play the guitar, which yes, they can probably hear in their apartment, what they're doing there is they're indicating a clear intent to stop you from engaging in a normal, legal activity. And if you feel substantial stress and fear of legal consequences, like what if one time one of those cops comes out and decides to arrest you, right? I mean, you never know. And so you feel like, I guess I can't even play my guitar. That might be enough to get a restraining order. Now, what probably wouldn't count is if you decide that you are going to start playing some Ed Sheeran Shape of You on your guitar, jamming out at 2 a.m. when you get back from the bar, and you're still feeling it, you're feeling good, you're feeling the music, and they shout at you to stop. You don't hear them because you were just belting out those lyrics, and they call the cops on you that one time. That's not going to be enough. All right, example 3. After learning about your allergy to incense, your neighbor, with whom you've had numerous disputes with due to the tandem parking situation that is present sometimes in LA, begins burning incense excessively every day. In fact, you're wondering how you can smell it so severely in your apartment. You look in their window on the way up the stairs and you see no less than 10 sticks of Nag Champa lit up. The smoke for you makes your home uninhabitable. It's triggering allergic reactions and it's forcing you to stay elsewhere, causing you significant distress. That might be enough. Now, if they were just burning one stick of Nag Champa and they were like, "I'm sorry, you don't like it, but I love it. That probably wouldn't be enough, but the 10 sticks here. I feel like this is where nobody's burning 10 at one time. Like, nobody, right? So if they are doing that, they are probably doing this intentionally to bother you. And again, this isn't about whether they're being inconsiderate. Inconsiderate is different than doing something knowingly and intentionally that is going to cause a reasonable person substantial emotional distress. It doesn't mean that you get to control the whole environment, that you get to control everything, and that they can't do what they want. And maybe 10 isn't enough, but let's say you looked in there and there were 100 sticks of nag champa that they had bought at Whole Foods, brought home, and lit them all up because they know that you have an allergy and they're trying to annoy you. That might be enough. Example 4. Despite your cat being mostly quiet, he occasionally whines for treats, meows at you, demands to go into certain spaces, jumps up and down like cats do. Your neighbor complains every single day, claiming that your kitty is disturbing their peace. They've even told other neighbors about planning to get you evicted. You've overheard them loudly saying this right outside your window, showing a clear intent to try to use this as a weapon against you. And this is leading you to significant emotional turmoil. I mean, you have maybe a good rent-controlled apartment, but you also love your cat. And what they're doing here really isn't reasonable, right? I mean, cats are going to meow, cats are going to jump. If you can hear that in the other apartment, well, it's probably because your building doesn't have very good insulation, and it's really not a reasonable complaint. So if they're repeatedly complaining about this, saying that they're going to get you evicted over this loudly, that might be enough. Now, what wouldn't count is, let's say that your cat gets into the catnip, eats a ton of it, gets the zoomies at 2 or 3 a.m., and starts just running like crazy up and down your hallway in the apartment and driving your neighbor downstairs crazy. If they complain to your landlord about that, if they yell up at you, and if they hit their ceiling with a broom, that is not going to be enough to get a civil harassment restraining order. Example number 5. Your neighbor starts parking their car in a way that consistently blocks your car in the driveway. After you ask them to stop, you point out that they can just move their car more toward the edge of the driveway, and that way you both can park there and not have to drive around the block or 5 blocks away. They reply with comments like, "Good luck getting out now," clearly showing their intent to inconvenience and distress you. And after that, they make sure to block your car in anytime that they possibly can. Now, this causes you a lot of frustration, obviously a lot of annoyance, and it affects your daily routine. In fact, sometimes you can't get out, you have to go to work, so you end up Ubering there, even though you have a perfectly good car. Now, what wouldn't count is the occasional poor parking job that really isn't intentional. It's just that they are not good at parking. Now, going through all of these, just any one thing might not be enough. It depends on which judge you get, depends how the judge is feeling that way, because that's how subjective it is. But it also really depends on how you present everything. One thing that is really important to focus on is that it is intentional, because when you live near someone, you're going to do things probably that annoy someone, even when you really don't want to, right? Just unintentionally. And if you have a good relationship with your neighbors, typically you'll let things go whenever you can, or you'll point out to them, you may have not even realized about your parking job, here's what's going on, and they'll say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," and they'll fix it, right? But sometimes, unfortunately, you have a neighbor who's unreasonable. And that is when the civil harassment restraining order comes in. And it's not just about the facts that you have, it's about how they are presented. And it can be really hard to present the facts on your own behalf. I had that neighbor. She was driving me crazy. I became so upset with her and so angry that I don't think I would have done a good job representing myself. And that's how it can be sometimes with these civil harassment restraining orders, that you just become so mad. I've seen so many of these hearings. A lot of the people come off as crazy. And they probably aren't. I mean, at the time, if I showed up for the civil harassment restraining order hearing, I might have come across as totally crazy. And I don't think I am in everyday life, but in that situation, I'm an attorney, I know what to do in court, but I might have just been so aggravated just seeing her there and hearing her lie about me. It would have made me so upset. If you do want to file one of these, it's not always a good idea to try to represent yourself in them. So if at all possible, I do think that it's important to try to get an attorney. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you do have a civil harassment restraining order that you need to defend against, or you want to get one against your neighbor, because moving is not an option, you want to defend your home and you want to defend your peace, then feel free to give me a call. You can find my number down below. You can also book a consultation there. And if you did find this video helpful, please don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the bell, drop me a follow on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok.